My name's Matt. I'll try and be pretty quick because we've got a bit to get through still and lost some time. So I'm going to talk about innovation launch, which is a slightly different lens to the regulatory sandbox work that Kynwyn and James were talking about. If you think about regulatory sandbox as about a solution you already have in place, a barrier that you're facing with regulation, and you're looking to work with the regulators and government in solving that problem to grow your business. We're coming at it from a slightly different angle. So what we do is we're looking at how do we actually open up the doors of government to actually help and work with the private sector on solving government problems. And the areas that we're focusing in starting first and foremost is in our state and premier priority areas. So those are our key areas of focus in New South Wales that require partnership with private sector to solve those problems. What government through this process is recognising is that we are not able to solve the problem alone. And this program is designed in a way that ensures that private sector actually are participating and working with government to identify the most innovative and forward-thinking ways to solve the problems. And I'm going to have Mike is going to talk about our first challenge that we launched, which is the Smart Cities Accessibility Challenge. And then Natasha's going to come and talk about the DV Innovation Fund, which is a partnership between Department of Finance and Innovation and with Women New South Wales. So what I quickly will do is I'm just going to talk to you about the process of what we do and what it means for you who participate, and then I'll get the guys to come and talk about the actual program specifically as well. So probably really simple for you guys to understand. There's probably 4 key areas. As I talked about, we're going to have clearly defined problems. So this isn't just open to say, tell us your ideas or your thoughts that you have, that how you think you can solve problems that the government has. They're going to be very specific and concentrated. As an example, the Smart Cities Accessibility Challenge that Mike will be talking about is going to be very focused on what it is that we're trying to solve. So you, as people outside of government, actually understand the problem that needs to be solved, and you can identify whether you can actually solve that problem. Again, slightly different to regulatory sandboxes, you can have just an idea. So you might be at the stage of ideation, not at the stage of full execution and delivery and have this in the market somewhere. So it actually gives you an opportunity to look at how you might develop an idea, and we will support you through that process through to actually solving that problem. And I'll talk about that in a second. Second big thing, it is actually all about you and your ideas to solve the problem. So this isn't about us taking your ideas and then government going and trying to deliver that solution. Through this process, we always recognise that the ideas don't just sit outside of government, but the best ways of executing those ideas also sit outside of government, which kind of goes down to point 4 there, which is you own the IP, they're your ideas, you own the solution at the end of the day. And what we're enabling through that process is our citizens get far better and valuable outcomes in solving the problems. Our businesses are able to grow, so we're helping support, just like regulatory sandboxes, businesses to grow in New South Wales and ultimately outside of New South Wales, and which is really important for New South Wales as a state and what we represent and who we are. The third one in the middle is probably what people care about the most, is free money. So we offer up to, there is criteria, I have to always say, but up to $150,000 in funding for the winners against these programs. That is free money because it is not attached to anything. There's been programs in the past that governments have done where there needs to be attached funding in the private sector to actually make these things work. With the Innovation Launch Smart Cities program, I have to just probably highlight that because Natasha will talk about the DV Innovation Fund, which is slightly different. There's up to $150,000 in funding available that is unlocked in tranches for those winners to enable them to develop out their solution and work with government in releasing that. I'll just talk quickly about how the process actually works. It's pretty straightforward, and those familiar in the private sector with a lot of the competitions like Andrew, wherever he's gone, and what Slingshot do, is all about actually how do we grow and develop the best ideas and ensure that in partnership with private sector we get those best ideas. So the process that actually we go through is we open up for submissions just like regulatory sandboxes has, and we've got our Smart Cities one and the DV Innovation Fund one open right now. We are looking for, as I said, ideas all the way through to products that already exist in the market today. You have to be able to demonstrate that you can solve the problem and how you actually have validated it that you can solve that problem. Then we actually go through a process which we call a collab process, which is collaboration between the agencies impacted by the change, the people who actually are submitting the ideas, and other private sector innovators and entrepreneurs who are experts in the field, who can actually guide and support government in making the right decisions about actually how we deliver the outcomes in these particular initiatives. Once you come out of that collab process, if you're a finalist, you have a formal pitch event that you'll actually go through where you can pitch to a panel of judges, which is made up of both government and non-government experts. Again, you can see there through the entire theme of this process, it's not about just government, it's about actually working together as a group, where there'll be winners announced. There is not a limit, can I say, on winners. It is all based on each individual problem that we're trying to solve and the best ideas that actually come through that solve those problems. And then once those winners get announced, we actually have like an incubation phase. Now, depending on the organisation, will depend on what that incubation phase actually means for them. If you're a startup, as an example, where you've just got a fresh idea, the incubation will be a lot more important in terms of the process and how you might partner with an incubator to help you grow and develop your product in partnership with the government, all the way through to large companies who require a lot less of that incubation type capability, but must through that process demonstrate how their initiative solves the problem. And then the last two really important steps is being able to pilot and demonstrate that with the key agencies, and then the final outcome being that you actually launch that product and it's available for our consumers to consume to solve that problem. And when Micah talks about the Smart Cities Accessibility one, you'll get a really good flavour of what that actually means and what we're trying to do when we solve that problem. So very, very quickly, I'll try and get through all that for you, just to give you an overview of what the program is about doing and its intent. Probably just for some points of clarity, when Micah talks about the Smart Cities Accessibility Innovation Initiative, it will follow this process. When Natasha talks about the DV Innovation Fund, you'll notice there's a slightly different lens. There's more money available, which is fantastic, particularly for the problem space that Natasha will be talking about. And there'll be some slight nuances to this process, which Natasha will also talk about, to be able to support that innovation fund, because it goes over a lot longer period of time to be able to solve the problems in the domestic violence space. I will then come in after Micah and Natasha have spoken, just for a Q&A session as well. So hold your thoughts on any questions you might have on that. And after Micah and Natasha have spoken, we'll do some Q&A stuff as well. All right, thanks. I'll hand you over to Micah.
I've got a mic already.
Oh, you're right, good.
Feel all Madonna. Thanks, Matt, and thanks, Taya and the DFSI team for having us involved. And this is quite exciting, like going from a transport perspective, this is breaking those organisational barriers and taking a very broad approach. So we're really excited to be involved in the innovation launch. You didn't give me the clicker. I'll just picture the next slide. It's got circles on it. So I think I've got roughly 15 minutes. What I'm going to talk about is basically the purpose of the challenge, give a bit of a backstory as to where we've come from, basically set a bit of a baseline to shape what we expect from the challenge, talk a bit about the problem and the transport perspective on the challenge we're trying to solve here, and a little plug for open data. It's something I care about very, very deeply. Right, so this is text from the website. So the purpose is to make cities of New South Wales more accessible, but really at transport, where our mandate is to put the customer at the centre of all decision making, and really this challenge is around empowering customers with better access to transport services, with a focus on those customers that need it the most. So we've got here, there's a focus on the transport disadvantage for people with the disabilities. And as I talk through this, I'll try and bring the words to life and maybe prompt a few questions towards the end. It's about improving the journey experience for all customers, but obviously with a focus on those that need it most. We want to be able to engage better with people with disadvantage, and we want to improve the partnerships to ensure there's no unnecessary barriers. So that's really just to foster that collaboration with organisations outside government and outside the transport cluster. And also, as a bit of a prompt here, this is not just about customers with disabilities. This is about all customers might have barriers to entry. We've got an ageing population, and we see some significant challenges over the horizon. So it's to think broadly about any customer that might experience barriers with accessing or using the transport services. Now, the backstory, we've been opening data and trying to encourage innovation since 2012. Like, it's a bit of old news, but it's still the shining light for us. This is just a simple graph that shows since 2012 how we've released different data sets for third-party products to use, and how that's been taken up by customers. So right now, we've got partners with third-party real-time apps. Hands up if you know TripView, Next there, TripGo, use that. So right now we've got across that portfolio, there's been over 5 million unique customer downloads. They are third-party products that we simply have given access to data and encouraged over the years. A simple but very, very still successful story. There's our portfolio, a couple of the superstars we've seen here. While this has been going on since 2012, we've had no shortage of other innovation challenges. I think I've already been prompted. We've got a challenge for how do we improve the learner-driver experience, completing that logbook. We've had challenges around how do we use beacons on transport services, and specifically, we had a challenge back in 2000, and I think it was 14, for some digital products that would be suitable and improve the experience for customers with accessibility needs. So I think for this challenge, the key message that comes out of this, there's already a very high bar, and a couple of those superstars that worked on a couple of these products, Metarove, are in the room now. So for this challenge, especially with the money associated and the outcome it's striving to achieve, the bar is quite high. And where Transport is absolutely committed to supporting innovation, and engaging outside of transport. If you don't know it, I suggest as you get into this challenge, look at the future transport technology roadmap. Started with a large summit last year, but has become a significant program within Transport for New South Wales. It signals where our technology focus over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years should be, and calls out a lot of theme areas. But the driving force behind it is that transport can't do it alone. We need the external thinking to come and help us solve the problems. And it's about partnerships rather than us taking the traditional approach of being overly specific and demanding what we want. We want the insights to drive us forward. And supporting that is we are an open data organisation. Everyone's heard of open data. We've got a pipeline of work to make more transport data sets open, but it's not just about publishing data for us. This engagement, this challenge, and all the other challenges driven by future transport is delivering material benefits to customers, improving the experience for our citizens. So the next little bit, I'm going to talk actually a bit more around the challenge. So just to give it scale, 1 in 5 people in New South Wales has some form of disability that might give them a barrier to using our transport network. 1 in 5 of our citizens is over 60, and the population is ageing. These are we're for all customers across New South Wales. We're very focused on the customers that need our services and support the most. So this challenge is to overcome those barriers to entry so that they can use and access transport more actively, and participate more in life. Remove barriers that might restrict them participating to their fullest. Now, we've done some research in this area. So back in 2013, we had and it's still valid today, that we had a lot of research and focus groups to actually ask customers with accessibility needs, what do they need, what would assist them in using transport more actively. Now, in going through these are the same needs that any customer, anyone that uses transport would have. But, quite simple in their principles, but they still resonate today. They need assistance for how do I get there, where am I, what do I need to know, and how do I get help if I need it. Very simple principles, and they're the expectations that all customers, any customer with accessibility needs, needs to be fulfilled. This area is a focus for transport. So if you're participating in this challenge, I'd suggest there is a bit of research. You haven't seen these documents already. We have a transport action plan, one of our lead strategic documents that shows where the strategic targets are for us as an organisation. There's an enduring and quite significant transport access program, quite wide-ranging in its mandate. Everything from improving station access facilities, upgrading stations, right through to looking at customer information products. Suggest you have a look at that just to get some perspective on where transport's perspective and focus is at the moment. There's First Stop Transport, basically guides that are with that guide our digital products and customer channels to make it easier for customers to get information to assist themselves. We think that the bar is quite high already, and that I suppose the challenge within this challenge is we're looking not for these barriers to be tested. We're looking for broader thinking. And the exciting part with taking this beyond the walls of transport and having an all-of-government approach, we know that there are challenges across jurisdictions, if you like. Transport owns so much of the landscape. Local councils also own parts of the journey. Someone has to travel door to door. They travel in their local neighbourhood, connect with transport services, and then get off. And there's problems all across that journey. So we want that broader perspective, not just to look at transport services, but what do we need to tackle collectively to make this better for everyone. And I think what's important too, like in participating in this challenge, you'll have access to experts who can help guide and shape and co-design your ideas. And specifically, there's the Transport Access and Inclusion team that are specialists in this area that can help guide and provide feedback to make sure that this delivers the right outcome for customers. And open data. Look, this is published on the website. I've just tried to put it in a nice, pretty sort of format. But we have an open data hub, and there are some data sets there that are freely available. But key for these types of initiatives, we need the feedback to drive the agenda as to what data sets we should look at next. So look at the Open Data Hub, I suggest, get a perspective on what we've got there. But basically, if you don't see what you're looking for, this is an opportunity and the right sort of platform to be guiding us in the right direction. Questions, please.
Actually, what I might do, sorry, I'll interrupt for a second. What I might do is, just because I think it's important everyone hears Natasha speak as well, and I know people got to go, is we'll get Natasha to talk, and then we'll do a full Q&A on both at the end. Is that all right? Cool. All right, cheers.
I can't say no.
Also, if you go to slide 2, and Tara will talk about it as well later, just ask questions at any point in time throughout the session now, because it all gets captured and we'll be able to respond to it all as well. So if I just grab that, sorry, thank you. I'll just intro you to Natasha. So Natasha's from the Women New South Wales team who's leading the DV Innovation Fund. It is a brilliant fund. It is a completely different way of trying to tackle the problem of domestic and family violence, and really encourage everyone to both look at the innovation website for the Smart Cities Accessibility Challenge, but also for the Innovation Fund, and you can hear some great stuff from Natasha around what the team are trying to do and how they're trying to help solve that problem. So I'll introduce you to Natasha. Thanks.
Thanks, Matt. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. And due to the interruption that we had with the evacuation, I'll try and keep this presentation brief. But as Matt says, happy to take some questions afterwards. I'd like to begin actually by acknowledging Tay and Matt and the team at Innovation New South Wales for their support and for partnering with us in this venture. We're very fortunate to have that. So, as Matt mentioned, I'm Natasha Silva, the Director of Women New South Wales, and we're the government agency that's responsible for oversight of the New South Wales Government response to domestic and family violence. In August last year, we released the Blueprint for Reform, Safer Lives for Women, Men and Children, which over the next 4 years sets out the government's response in relation to domestic and family violence. So in terms of talking about the problem, what we're trying to solve, What I guess I'd like to do is talk about what we know about domestic and family violence, and perhaps given the increased focus on this area in the past 12 months to 2 years, some of this will be known to you. But of course there is the definition of domestic and family violence, the behaviours that indicate violence are things like, as well as physical violence, behaviours that are threatening or controlling, and it also includes stalking. These are the statistics. We know that 1 in 6 women, 20 and 1 in 20 men have experienced, over the age of 15, have experienced some form of violence from a partner that they've lived with. We also know that Aboriginal women are much more likely to have experienced domestic and family violence. And we know that the vast majority of perpetrators are male. Overlaid with all these statistics is the fact that we also know that domestic and family violence is severely underreported. So these are the statistics we know, but we can assume that there are much higher statistics in relation to it. We know the cause of domestic and family violence, and that is gender inequality, essentially. We know that it occurs in all parts of society and that the impact is significant and broad-reaching. We also know that the impact on our mainstream and specialist services is significant, and you can see there the range of services that interact with the incidence of domestic and family violence. We know that there's a significant economic cost to domestic and family violence. The cost to New South Wales is estimated to be $5.6 billion annually. And what's interesting about the cost of domestic violence is that historically the New South Wales government has, in our response as we've become aware of as a society of DFE as a community issue, is that most of the spending has been in the response area. That's where all the funds have gone. We know they're scarce resources, so it's about the response, about assisting people who have experienced domestic and family violence. And you'll see here that there's only around 2% of the overall spend that has been focused on prevention and early intervention. So a very small proportion has looked at addressing prevention and early intervention. So we recognise that, as Matt was saying, we recognise that we don't have all the solutions. What we want to do is try and look at the prevention and early intervention end on the scale of domestic violence, and see and try things that are new. Because we've spent so little money in this space, we don't know what works. And we suspect that there are others who do know what works, or at least would like to try an idea that they have in the prevention and early intervention space in relation to domestic and family violence. So as part of the blueprint for reform, the Minister for the Prevention of Domestic and Family Violence and Sexual Assault last year announced the opening of the $20 million DFE Innovation Fund. So the DFE Innovation Fund focuses on these 3 areas. So prevention, as I mentioned before, early intervention, and also crisis response. These are the 3 areas that the fund covers. And these definitions are available on the website as well. So we want to know people's ideas for solving this very complex issue. So this is the social innovation aspect that was spoken about a little bit earlier this morning. We want to know what people out there think could be possible solutions in terms of changing attitudes and preventing future violence and breaking the cycle of violence. So, in keeping with the innovation theme, we're looking for solutions that are new and groundbreaking. It's in our innovation fund, we're looking for collaboration. That's key to our innovation fund, is that partnerships are formed. I'll talk a bit about that in an upcoming slide. New technologies, and we're also keen to, if there are things that are currently operating, but there are thoughts about how that can be improved, we're also willing to look at that. So who can apply? It's open to anyone to apply, essentially. And what we have required, though, is that there are partnerships involved that involve non-government organisations. Now, the reason for that is that we recognise that there's a sector out there very specialised in the response to DFE, who understand the drivers of DFE, and given the complexity of the problem, it's essential that anyone coming from outside that area who wants to work in this space, that we ensure that whatever their idea is, that it's consistent with the approach to DFE that ensures safety for people in the community. So this, I guess, speaks to some of the things that Matt was talking about why the private sector would want to engage in social innovation. And we think there are opportunities for the private sector to diversify the portfolio, to align with social values that many organisations promote. The website there. And EOIs are currently open. They're due to close next Friday. And really what we're seeking, they opened in mid-December, but what we're seeking at the moment is just really high-level EOIs. And we're not suggesting that partnerships need to be formed at this stage, and we're also available to facilitate those partnerships. So where you have an idea but don't yet have a partner, we would encourage you to make an EOI application, and at the next stage, we can help you find a partner in the sector, an NGO partner in the sector. And so this is what we hope to achieve, that we can improve outcomes, not just for victims of DFE, but also reduce the incidence of DFE over the longer term. And you saw Matt's chart that talked about the process. For our innovation fund is slightly different to that, as he mentioned. So we are going to have a feedback process after our EOIs close, and then a collab process for those that get to the next stage. And as you can see, we're hoping that the funding will be released by the 30th of June for those successful projects. And there you have it. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that, Natasha. So we don't have, I mean, we're already way over, but I think if we do a couple of quick questions now, you can see there's some very keen people, and then what we'll do is there's lots of food over here. Encourage everyone to go over and have some food. Come and speak to us, ask whatever questions you want. I'll be with you in 2 seconds. And then we'll also encourage you just to use Slido to ask any questions at any point in time. We're going to do some follow-up Q&A stuff for you as well, and talk more about that in a moment. But I might just ask a few quick questions, and then we'll get to it. I'll get to you second. So, gentleman up there.
Hand up.
And it can be, sorry for anything, so we'll cover it all off at one piece.
My question's quite easy. Grant Dyer from IBM. I'm just interested in, from the innovation perspective and the funding for the domestic violence environment, who owns the IP at the end and who ultimately owns or operates the solution?
So it would depend on what you're submitting in terms of who owns and operates the solution. So obviously that's unique to each individual idea that is submitted. In terms of the IP, absolutely sits with the owners. So whoever actually has submitted that idea, both for the DV Innovation Fund as well as the Smart Cities Accessibility, the IP is with the proponent. So you guys actually own the ideas, you own the IP, it is your product, your solution. I think it's a really important thing to understand, because it's also about how you're going to run that going forward. So you can't go, I've got a great idea, government, go and do it. If you want that to execute and you want the funding, you've actually got to make that thing work. It is your idea at the end of the day. You have to be successful in delivering that idea and solving that problem. Sorry, yeah.
Katja Beitert, just one question in relation to the challenges, because the other core areas, when will specific challenges be released that fit into the other core areas?
So it will be dependent on a couple of different things. So obviously there's a focus piece of thing we need to look at. So we can't have 45,000 challenges happening at once because it won't give us the focus that is required and won't give enough attention and time to each of the challenges. So what we'll look at is demand and accessibility, both from a government and private enterprise point of view. So it will just over time. So ideally we've kind of been going down a pathway of every quarter we would release a new challenge. However, that got blown out of the water pretty quickly at the end of last year. So it really will come down to demand and need. But we roughly have been kind of targeting every quarter that we would open up a new challenge. But it's obviously always open for change depending on where demands are. Want some more ones? Quick? Yep.
Hello, my name's Zoe Heder from AppyWork. Question about the domestic violence program. So initially you talked about how only 2% spent on early intervention and prevention. Is that intended to be the focus for this round? I'm particularly interested in gender equality and can see a number of programs that could fit into that area of looking at how to address gender inequality in various forums. But does that fall under the range of this, or are you looking for something that's more towards the more extreme end of domestic violence rather than preventing the underlying causes? So that's my question.
Thanks, good question. I think if we're addressing, if an idea is addressing the underlying causes of domestic family violence, which we know is gender inequality, and you can clearly make that link, it certainly will be considered. Yeah, so just to add to that, it's very important, something I'm very passionate about is making sure you can clearly articulate how your solution solves the problem. Not I've got something over here that I'm trying to solve and I'm going to attach it to that so I can do what I'm trying to do, but you need to be able to very clearly articulate the pathway of how that actually solves the problem. So agree with the gender equality being a major factor of that. If you can demonstrate whatever solution that you are proposing has a direct link to the outcome, the impact of domestic and family violence and how that is going to contribute to solving that, then absolutely that would be the stuff that Natasha and the team will be looking for. But you need to be able to be very clear about how your solution solves the actual problem that needs to be addressed and how you're able to contribute to that. Does that make sense? Cool. It is challenging, absolutely. It's not an easy area to solve. If it was, we would have solved it by now. But what is challenging and very important is that something that we expect people to be able to do is demonstrate how you're going to do that. It's very important that you can, whether it be through research, through conversations, whatever, you need to be able to demonstrate that that solution solves the problem. Otherwise, we could be sitting where we are today in another 5 years, having done all this stuff and be nowhere further ahead because we haven't been able to demonstrate how the solution solved the problem. Maybe one last one and then I'll let everyone go. Yeah, up the back there. So.
Hi. I know one of the drivers for the domestic violence challenge was the Premier's initiative in the reduction of perpetrator reoffence. Unfortunately, now that the Premier has changed, is the commitment and funding essentially still there? Yes.
Premier's priorities have not changed. So whilst the Premier may, our new Premier has not made a decision to change the priorities at this stage. I suspect even as those priorities change over time where needed, it absolutely does not change where the DV Innovation Fund is at. Cool. Okay, so just quickly wrap up, Teo, say a few words. What I'll encourage you to do is, if you have any questions, come and see us, submit them via Slido. Also, contact us afterwards. We'll send out a whole bunch of stuff for you. We're also going to hold, given what's happened today as well, we're going to hold a couple of extra sessions over the next couple of weeks for different, the Smart Cities Accessibility and the DV Innovation Fund. So we'll send out some more information about that as well that will give people the opportunity to hear more about those individual initiatives and talk about them more as well. So I appreciate your time and I'll hand you over to Taya. Thanks.
Thanks, Matt. I don't want to keep you any longer. I just wanted to say a final thank you to our guests today. The big focus of all of the work that the innovation team is doing is really collaborating and setting up partnerships with other parts of government. So thank you very much to Micah from Department of Transport, to Natasha from Department of Health, and also thank you to Andrew Campbell from Go Catch if he's still here. The success of the programs and what we're trying to achieve will only be successful based on the value of the partnerships that we generate across government, particularly around these initiatives. We can't do these, implement these initiatives on our own. And Kynwynn mentioned previously that we are a small team. We're a small team, but we're expanding, and our reach is actually quite broad across government, and we're continuing to work and set up those partnerships. So thank you very much for your time today. Apologies for the delay. If you have any other questions, please either continue to send them through to the Slido, or also the Ask Nick banner over here is what you will see on our website. Click on that icon on the website and you'll be able to enter in some questions and send those directly to us. So thank you very much for your patience today, and thank you for coming.
Thanks, Thanks, everyone. Thanks, everyone. Please come and partake in the plenty of food, and to hear about the other events, you can follow the Twitter hashtag.